When Jeremy Hunt, as he was then Health Secretary, quoted Jay Feinman's book, Delay, Deny, Defend, he did it. He got the tricolon back to front, but he was nevertheless quoting it and saying this is the way that the NHS deals with whistleblowers, and that shouldn't be the case. He wasn't really being honest, or if he was being honest, he wasn't being effective, because that is exactly the way that the NHS continues to treat people who call out its faults. And the Telegraph today talks about the four-step playbook the NHS uses to break whistleblowers. I've been talking to whistleblowers today and in the in the last 18 months, and the Telegraph says there is a method for trying to break whistleblowers. The NHS managers use a playbook of tactics to silence whistleblowers designed to break you, quote. And this is in an article by Janet Eastham. And she says there's that a Telegraph investigation has found so many similarities in the way different NHS trusts and clinics deal with whistleblowers that the problem seems to be systematic. And I know a person who was working in NHS England who has experienced this sort of thing. So he was right in the middle of the system and experienced it right at the top. Doctors who complain are then bullied and harassed from managers, from colleagues, and there is a culture of cover-up. It's it doesn't matter whether NHS chiefs, as for example, when there was the Lucy Letby case, say that, whistleblowers must no longer be ignored. Not only they are not ignored, they are identified and silenced. That is the problem with the NHS. And it's a, doctors are being forced, doctors and nurses, and indeed responsible bureaucrats are being forced to choose between patient safety and their careers. Because a bureaucrat, for example, whose job is to arrange cover for doctors or nurses, and who sees people being given lads' rates or jobs for their mates, is duty bound to call that out. But if they do, they will be penalised. They will lose their job. Now, under the NHS rules, if somebody wishes to leave a particular department, the NHS is duty bound to transfer them to another department because of the fears about the brain drain. But that doesn't always happen, because there is the wonderful phrase which has been repeated in the news. In fact, I think Jeremy Corbyn's brother was involved in a case which repeated this, where a judge says, a contract is not contractual, because the NHS doesn't want to move people to another job if they've blown a whistle. If they're whistleblowers, the NHS wants to get rid of them and will do anything to harangue, harass, to abuse, and to poison their reputation, to make their life impossible, so that they can not only no longer continue in the NHS, but can no longer continue in the workforce. The techniques used by the NHS management are techniques designed to destroy a person. And NHS managers have targeted people simply because they have raised questions about patient safety, because they've raised questions about patient deaths. The true number of deaths that has been identified in the NHS that was avoidable is simply staggering. And as somebody who's been a patient and has been mistreated in NHS hospitals, I can speak with a little bit of authority. And it's not that it's happened one time, it's happened both times I've been in hospital. And it's basically the same issue. In an attempt to save money, rather than giving me the drugs that my condition warrants, I'm on the haemophilia scale. On both occasions, I was given cheaper drugs, or the hospital tried to carry out its own tests to confirm what one of its sister hospitals had already diagnosed. And time was wasted. In one case, my appendix burst, and in the other case, because I didn't have the correct drugs, about 10 days after I came out of hospital, my wounds opened up, and I was back in hospital again for another 2 weeks, completely pointlessly taking up a bed in the NHS because the information I had given was not acted upon, and because the hospital management, quote, knew better. This was a management decision. It wasn't a medical decision. It wasn't a decision by my consultant or by the nurses who were looking after me. It was a management decision about cutting costs, saving money. And why would anybody know? People would know because people die. And I'm very, very lucky that in both cases I survived. But this is about the mismanagement of the NHS, and it's not about the quality of doctors or the quality of nurses or the quality of cleaners and the assistant staff. It's about managerial decisions being taken on the hoof. And it's about one hospital not speaking to another hospital. It's about GPs not passing on the paperwork. And it's about when, as I also found later on, when you ask for copies of the documentation you were given something entirely different that has been carefully doctored and changed to try to reflect a better service than the one you actually got. So that's not only poor bureaucracy, it's deceitful bureaucracy. And this isn't in one instance, and this isn't in one hospital. And that's me. That's me, just one individual person. And I don't want to sue the NHS. In fact, I'm too late to do so in the first case, even if I wanted to. The last thing I want to do is to sue the NHS. But I do want to call them out. And I do want to say that this should change. This should change. And this must change. And whistleblowers need to be listened to, because it's not just patients who call out when things are wrong. It's people within the system who are duty-bound to call out things that have gone wrong. But when they do, they are slapped down and slapped down and slapped down, because the NHS is more concerned with the reputation of its management and its bureaucratic busybodies than it is with saving lives and getting things done. And among those bureaucratic busybodies are the people in Whitehall. This goes right to the top. Deny, delay, defend. And that was a slogan which comes from a fellow who wrote a book about the way insurance companies manage problems. And of course, when it comes down to it, although we try to pretend that the NHS is a public company, publicly owned and serving the public, in the end, it's heavily managed on the basis of the insurance methodology. It is, in fact, a giant insurance company. And we have this question about should the NHS be private or public? It should be public, of course. And this patina of deceit should be erased from the NHS. If we want a public company, we must have a public company. But we can't have what we've got at the moment, which is something that pretends to be public, but in fact is being managed like an insurance company. And people who have no medical experience are taking major decisions about our health. And when anybody complains, they are silenced. I know, because I've talked to these people.